I used to think that if you loved someone enough, you could stop them from leaving. I don't think that anymore. When people ask how it all started, I never know where to begin. Maybe it was the night he came home late for the third time in a week, smelling like a perfume I didn't own. Maybe it was the way I'd been pretending not to notice the cracks forming between us, convincing myself that every couple goes through phases. Or maybe it was long before that, the slow erosion that happens when two people stop reaching for each other and start surviving side by side. We'd been together 8 years, married for 3. His name was Daniel. We met when I was 25, both working ridiculous hours in the city, him in finance, me in a marketing firm that promised flexibility but really meant constant availability. I used to love that about us, two driven people who still managed to come home to each other at the end of the day. We were partners, a team. That's what I told everyone. The first time I found the messages, I told myself they didn't mean anything. Just jokes with a coworker, inside references that maybe sounded worse than they were. He told me I was overreacting, that she had a boyfriend, that it was just how people flirt online. The word flirt made my stomach twist, but I swallowed it down. I didn't want to be the jealous wife. I deleted the screenshots. I deleted the conversation from my own mind, or tried to. But something changed after that. I started noticing the small things, the way his phone never left his pocket anymore, how he angled the screen away from me when he texted, how he'd started wearing cologne again after years of not caring, how he suddenly had work dinners that didn't include spouses. I used to pride myself on not being the kind of person who snoops, but one night after he fell asleep on the couch, I opened his phone. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped it. There it was, her name, saved under some random contact label like Darren Work. I opened the messages, and there it was in black and white. I miss you too. I can still smell you on my shirt. Can't stop thinking about last night. There's this thing that happens when your world cracks open. It's not loud. It's quiet. Your brain tries to protect you by pretending it's not real. You go numb before you break. I remember sitting on the edge of the couch, the blue light from his phone flickering across my hands, and feeling nothing. Just this weird stillness. I didn't even cry. Not then. When I confronted him the next morning, he didn't deny it. That almost hurt worse. He just said, "It wasn't serious. It didn't mean anything." I laughed not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. Months of secrets, of lies, and it didn't mean anything. He said he loved me. He said it was a mistake. He said he was confused. And the part that broke me most, some small, desperate piece of me still wanted to believe him. We tried therapy, or I did. He came to 2 sessions, sat with his arms crossed, said all the right things about working through it and rebuilding trust. But I could tell he wasn't really there. You can't rebuild something with someone who doesn't think they broke it. For months, I lived in this strange in-between space. We still shared a bed, still went to dinners with friends, still played the role of a functioning couple. But I felt like a ghost inside my own life. Every word he said, every touch, felt rehearsed. My body stopped trusting him long before my mind caught up. Then one day, I found out she'd been at our apartment, not while I was gone, while I was asleep. He'd had her there in our home after I went to bed early one night sick. She sat on my couch, maybe drunk from our wine, maybe laughing at the photos on our fridge. I'll never forget that feeling, the mix of violation and disbelief, like my reality had been rewritten behind my back. That was the day I left. I didn't make a scene. I didn't throw things or scream or beg. I just packed a suitcase, grabbed my laptop, and walked out the door. He followed me halfway down the hall, saying my name, saying wait, saying don't do this. I didn't look back. I think I knew if I did, I might not go. I stayed at a friend's place for a while. Maya, my college roommate, she didn't ask questions at first, just handed me a glass of wine and told me to sit down. That night, I cried until my chest hurt. It was the kind of crying that doesn't sound human. People talk about heartbreak like it's one big explosion. But it's not. It's 1,000 tiny deaths. Every time you remember something good, every time you see their name in your inbox, every time you wake up and reach for someone who's not there. The weeks after were a blur of logistics, divorce papers, splitting accounts, finding a new apartment, It's strange how something as emotional as heartbreak turns into paperwork. You start talking about furniture and equity, and it almost tricks you into thinking it's manageable, until you go to bed and remember what you've lost. I thought leaving would make me feel strong, empowered, but mostly I just felt hollow. People say time heals, but what they don't tell you is that it's not time that does it, it's the things you do with that time. I started going for long walks after work, just to be outside, to remember that the world was still turning. I joined a pottery class because Maya said it would get me out of my head. I didn't care about bowls or clay, but there was something comforting about using my hands again, shaping something new from something formless. And that's where I met him. His name was Evan. He sat 2 seats down from me, tall, quiet, with this calm energy that felt out of place in the chaos of the city. He didn't try to flirt. He didn't even ask about me at first. He just showed up week after week, and eventually we started talking. About music, books, stupid movies, about nothing. It felt safe. The first time he asked me out, I almost said no. I wasn't ready, but he smiled in this soft way that made me want to try. We went for coffee on a Sunday morning. It was supposed to be an hour, but we talked for 4. It wasn't electric, not in the way I used to think love had to be. It was easy, comfortable. I didn't have to perform. I didn't have to be anyone other than the tired, healing version of myself. For months, we just existed in that quiet in-between space. Friends, maybe more, but never defined. And I think that's why I let my guard down. Because for the first time in so long, I wasn't bracing for impact. We didn't define it for a long time, and maybe that's what kept it from breaking too soon. Evan was patient in a way that unnerved me sometimes. He didn't press, didn't demand that I heal faster than I could. Some nights we'd just sit side by side in his apartment, watching whatever show was on. And I'd feel that strange mixture of comfort and fear that comes with being seen again. One evening, after class, we walked for blocks in the soft summer rain. He stopped under a streetlight and asked, "Do you ever think about going back?" I knew what he meant, Daniel. "Sometimes," I said. "Not because I want to, just because it feels easier to want what you already know." He nodded. We didn't speak for a while. The city hummed around us. Evan reached for my hand, and I let him. My fingers felt cold against his. "It doesn't have to be easy," he said quietly. "It just has to be honest." That line stuck with me. Honest. I'd spent years twisting myself into someone palatable, agreeable, easy to love. I hadn't realized how dishonest that was, not to him, but to me. A few weeks later, he kissed me for the first time. It was late. We'd been cooking pasta, the kind that sticks together because you forget to stir it. I was laughing about it, wine-drunk and tired, and then he was just there, close, hesitant, like he was asking without words. It wasn't a cinematic kiss. It was warm and real, the kind that sneaks up on you and rearranges the room. I wish I could say it was simple after that, but nothing about rebuilding ever is. Some nights, when he'd fall asleep next to me, I'd feel panic rising in my chest, not because of anything he did, but because I couldn't stop waiting for the other shoe to drop. My body still remembered what it felt like to be blindsided. Once during breakfast, my phone buzzed and he glanced at it, not even suspiciously, just a reflex, and I snapped. "Don't do that," I said too sharply. He looked up, confused. "Do what?" "Look at my phone like that." He blinked. I wasn't. "I know," I said, softer now. I'm sorry, I still get triggered sometimes." He didn't say anything, just reached across the table and touched my wrist. "You don't have to apologize for how you learned to protect yourself." That was the thing about him. He didn't need to fix everything. He understood that sometimes love was just about sitting with the mess and not turning away. But life doesn't stop testing you just because you're trying. One afternoon, months later, I got an email from Daniel. Just a single line, "Can we talk?" It had been nearly a year. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Part of me wanted to delete it immediately. Another part, the masochistic one, wanted to know why. Closure, I told myself again, always closure. I didn't reply at first, but a week later I did. We met at a cafe downtown, neutral ground. He looked older, sharper somehow, but his voice was the same. We made small talk. He told me he'd started therapy. He told me he'd quit drinking. He said he finally understood what he'd lost. It was strange, sitting there, hearing him say all the things I used to beg him to say and feeling nothing. Not hate, not longing, just a faint sadness for who we used to be. He reached for my hand once, then stopped himself. "You seem happy," he said. "I am," I said, and I meant it. When I left, I didn't look back. It wasn't dramatic, just quiet, final. That night, I told Evan about it. He didn't get angry, he just asked, "Did it help?" I thought for a long time before answering. "Yeah," I said. "It helped me realize I'm done needing him to understand." After that, something in me softened. I stopped waiting for apologies that would never fix anything. I stopped measuring my worth by how someone else saw me. I started making peace with the fact that I might always carry that scar, and that was okay. Love didn't feel like a cure anymore. It felt like choosing, every day, to stay open even when you've been hurt, to trust that maybe not everyone will leave. Evan and I still fight sometimes. We still misunderstand each other. But when I look at him, I don't see the man who replaced someone else. I see the man who met me where I was broken and didn't run. And for the first time in a long, long time, I think that's enough. Years passed quietly, in the way that time does when you're no longer counting your wounds. I moved apartments twice, got a promotion, learned how to spend weekends without needing them to mean something. Evan and I stayed together, though we had our storms, real ones, the kind that expose you rather than destroy you. I learned that commitment isn't a single choice but 1,000 small ones made daily, even when you don't feel poetic about it. Especially then. Sometimes I'd still think of Daniel, but not the way I used to. He became more like a story I once told too many times, a memory polished by repetition until it stopped resembling what actually happened. If I saw him on the street now, I think I'd recognize the shape of him before the face. That familiar way he carried himself, always half elsewhere. I wonder if he ever thinks of me, not with longing, but with that strange respect you develop for your own mistakes. One night, I found an old notebook from those years, crammed behind boxes of books I'd meant to donate. Inside were fragments of poems, letters I never sent, lists of things I thought would make me better. I sat on the floor, cross-legged, and read through them. My handwriting was smaller then, tense. I almost didn't recognize the woman who wrote those words, so desperate to be chosen, so convinced that being loved and being safe were the same thing. Evan came into the room quietly, leaned against the doorway. "What's that?" "Old things," I said, closing the notebook. He smiled a little. "You look like you're saying goodbye." "Maybe I am," I said. And I meant it, not to him, not even to Daniel, but to the version of myself who never believed she'd survive without someone's approval. I think about love differently now. It's not fireworks, not grand gestures or promises whispered in the dark. It's quieter. It's the kind of warmth that doesn't demand attention but lingers, steady and sure. It's realizing you can stand on your own and still want someone beside you, not because you need them to hold you up, but because you like the view from where you're both standing. There are still moments, of course, when the ache returns. When I pass a certain cafe, or a song from that time sneaks into a playlist. But the ache isn't sharp anymore. It's almost tender, like tracing a scar and remembering that you healed. Sometimes, when I can't sleep, I'll catch myself thinking about how easily it all could have gone differently. If I'd ignored the signs, if I'd stayed, if I'd never met Evan. But those thoughts don't spiral like they used to. They just drift through me like passing weather. Because maybe the real miracle isn't that I found love again, it's that I found a self worth loving. And in the stillness of nights like this, when the city hums outside and everything feels balanced on the edge of something almost holy, I realize that surviving heartbreak isn't about rebuilding what was lost. It's about realizing you were never broken beyond repair. I used to think forgiveness meant letting someone back in. Now I know it just means setting down the weight of what they did to you and walking away without dragging it into every tomorrow. So that's what I did. I forgave him. I forgave myself. And somewhere in the quiet that followed, life began again, softly, like dawn seeping through the blinds, patient and merciful, reminding me that even after all the wreckage, the light still finds its way in. Sometimes, when I look back, it feels like my whole 20s were one long exercise in learning how to stay. To stay in a room when the silence got heavy. To stay in my own skin when it felt unfamiliar. To stay with someone not because it was easy, but because we both kept choosing not to run. Evan and I married in the fall. It wasn't the kind of wedding people post about online, no destination venue, no filtered photos under fairy lights. Just 40 people in a converted bookstore cafe, mismatched chairs, and a second-hand dress. My mother cried during the vows, and for the first time I didn't feel like I was promising perfection. I was promising presence. When the ceremony was over and everyone drifted out to smoke or talk or help themselves to cake, I stood by the window and watched the city lights flicker on one by one. Evan came up behind me, slipped his hand into mine, and said, "It feels quiet." "It does," I said, "in a good way." He kissed the top of my head. "That's how I know it's real." And I believed him, because love, I realized, doesn't always roar, it settles. It roots itself in the quiet corners of your life, where the ordinary becomes sacred. Years from now, I'll probably forget the small details of that day. I'll forget the playlist we made, or which cousin got too drunk during the speeches. But I'll remember that moment at the window, when the noise of everything else faded and I felt steady. Not ecstatic, not euphoric, just steady. Maybe that's what healing really is, when steadiness feels like a kind of joy. There are still echoes sometimes. I'll be walking home from work, pass a couple arguing on the sidewalk, and something inside me will tighten. Or I'll hear a song that used to play when Daniel and I were still pretending to be happy, and for a second, the past hums faintly under my skin. But it fades faster now. The ghosts don't stay long when you stop inviting them to dinner. And sometimes, in the middle of an ordinary evening, laundry humming, dinner simmering, life unremarkably good, I'll catch my reflection and think you made it. Not just through heartbreak, but through the long, quiet years of rebuilding. Through learning that love isn't supposed to consume you, it's supposed to meet you where you are and still see what you're becoming. I think if I could talk to the version of me who once begged for someone to stay, I'd tell her this. It's okay that you broke. It's okay that you loved badly before you learned how to love at all. None of it makes you foolish. It just makes you human. Because in the end, the story was never about Daniel, or even about Evan. It was about me, about the girl who thought she'd disappear without love, and the woman who learned she never would. So this is what it feels like to come back to yourself. Not a grand moment, just the quiet exhale of knowing you're finally safe in your own life. And that's the thing nobody tells you. Healing doesn't feel like victory. It feels like peace. And peace, after everything, feels like love. Sometimes I walk home at dusk, the city washed gold and soft, and I think about how far I've come without realizing it. The streets are the same, the people rush past, but something in me has shifted so completely that even the air feels different. There was a time when I measured my worth by who stayed, by how gently I could hold someone else's chaos. Now, I measure it by how quietly I can hold my own. Evan still makes coffee the wrong way, still leaves socks in places that make me roll my eyes, still looks at me sometimes like he can't quite believe I'm real. We argue, we make up, we fold into the rhythm of an ordinary life, and it's in that ordinariness that I finally found something like grace. Not the cinematic kind, but the kind that hums beneath the surface, steady and tender. Every so often, I'll dream about Daniel, not the betrayal or the fights, just flashes of the old apartment, the couch by the window, laughter that came before everything cracked. I wake up with a faint ache, but it's not pain anymore. It's gratitude, maybe. The kind you feel for the lessons you didn't want but desperately needed. There's a strange freedom in realizing that heartbreak isn't something you outgrow. It's something you integrate. It becomes a layer, thin, almost translucent, that lets light through differently. Softer, warmer. I used to think healing meant returning to who I was before. Now I know it means carrying who I was through every version I've become. Sometimes, when I see a younger woman on the train crying quietly into her sleeve, I want to tell her what no one told me. You survive. Not by forgetting, not by finding someone new, but by finally being able to look at the past and feel nothing tugging you back. I don't know if what I have now is forever. Maybe nothing is. But when I watch Evan reading on the couch, his face lit by lamplight, or when he reaches for my hand in his sleep, I think this is enough. Not perfect, not eternal, just enough. And that's the miracle, isn't it? That after everything, after the wreckage and rebuilding, you can still wake up, make coffee, kiss someone good morning, and mean it. You can still open your heart knowing it might break again, and do it anyway. Because love, real love, isn't the thing that saves you. It's the quiet proof that you already saved yourself. And sometimes, standing at the window as the city settles into night, I whisper a kind of goodbye, not to anyone else, but to the version of me who thought she'd never get here. She made it. And so did I.